Good morning, evening, or afternoon, depending on what side of the pond you're on, and welcome to another special edition of Across the Pitch. My name is Phil Kennedy, and we're here now for episode 13 of 20 in our Premier League Worst Signings 2010 to 2020. Ross Davenport has joined me today, and we have Andy from New York with us today, and it's very appropriate that Andy is from New York because we are going to be talking about Jay-Z's favorite team, Brighton Hove Albion. Welcome to the show, Andy. I that was a terrible joke, but it was all I had.
I'll apologize on Phil's behalf for that one. Please.
So, Andy, Ross tells me that you have a very interesting story of how you came to start supporting Brighton from New York. So why don't we start off with that before we get to the bad signings?
Sure. Do you want to ask me something about it, or you want me to just dive into it?
I've already read the article, so I don't want to give away too much. Dive into it from your perspective and tell us how it all got started.
So I guess it was just the way anyone else starts supporting, a European football team living in America. I was dating some girl who was a fan of Crystal Palace, and it was during a time that I wasn't watching Premier League that much. So I just thought, I'm going to support this team for my girlfriend. And then when she broke up with me, during our relationship, she didn't really want me supporting Crystal Palace. She thought it was weird that I had adopted her team, and she was like, go get your own club. So when she dumped me, I was like, okay, she always told me to get my own club. Now I can get my own club. What if I just chose Crystal Palace biggest rival? Who is that? And I saw it was a team named Brighton. And I was like, you know what? I've never heard of them, but I think I'm going to start supporting them. And I met some fans who supported the team, and I asked them yo, is it weird if I start supporting Brighton for this reason? And they were like, not at all. Welcome to the family. And the rest is history.
I think that's kind of how it is with anything that is not a Big Six team, is that you find that the fans are just supportive in England of anybody that wants to jump on board. I mean, Ross, you're a Bournemouth supporter, and I think that if somebody in the U.S. comes up to you and says that they're going to support Bournemouth, you don't care what reason. You don't care if they bought a used car and it had a Bournemouth sticker on it already.
No, I've had a few friends that have come along that way. Just they don't really have a Premier League team of their own, and they're good friends of mine. And since we've been in the Premier League, it's been a lot easier to follow and a lot easier to watch games. So I've got a few tag-along friends that have come along to the Premier League Fan Fest with me in Miami a few months ago before all this nonsense went down. But yeah, I don't think there's quite anybody like Andy who's gone from just becoming a fan to the level of fandom that Andy's managed to gather among the Brighton Hove Albion faithful.
It is unreal. I'll tell you that, man. Feels like a dream sometimes.
You're talking to a guy who heard about Accrington Stanley from a milk commercial, and now I'm president of the North American Fan Club. So it's just how things work on this side of the pond.
And now with your voice, Phil, you've got to get on the Andy train and start doing some songs, and then you'll be invited over the pond, multiple times a year, and get to watch your team live.
I'm trying to get over there, and I was basically trying to start planning a way to get over there, and then that's when this all kind of broke out. But yeah, it's like I've told them, well, once I get to Accrington, I might not ever come back.
I feel that way too, man. You go there, and that's the thing. You're there on vacation, you're there on a holiday, so you get to see all the amazing parts of the city. And when you leave, you're like, oh my God, I want to move there. But then you think of the reality, wait, if I live there, it's completely different than just going there on holiday.
Me being from Phoenix, Arizona, I don't know if I could take the winter weather.
Oh, yeah, man.
That's why you got to go to Brighton instead, Phil. Much nicer down there on the south coast. Just down the road from Bournemouth. Lovely weather all the time.
It still gets cold as hell, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. Yeah.
we've digressed a little bit, to use Aaron's line, but we do want to talk about some bad signings here, because that's what we brought Andy on the show for today. But before we get to your sightings, we have already done 12 of those, and Ross has memorized the 24 players from the 12 episodes that we've already done. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Ross to run down the bad signings thus.
Fake news that I've memorized them, but this is what things like spreadsheets are made for. First of all, obviously, first in my heart and first on the list, my beloved AFC Bournemouth, we had Jordan Ibe and Lee Tomlin. For Man City, we had Wilfred Bonney and Layaquin Mangala. For Burnley, Lucas Jukowitz and Ben Gibson. For Manchester United, Angel Di Maria and Bebe. For Spurs, Roberto Soldado and Vincent Janssen. Everton, Sandro Ramirez and Omar Nias. Aston Villa, Carlos Sanchez and Julian Lescott. For Wolves, we had Roger Johnson and Jamie O'Hara. Chelsea, Danny Drinkwater and Juan Cuadrado. For Arsenal, Mustafi and Andre Santos. For West Ham, Madibo Maiga and Ener Valencia. And then just our last one out, we had Newcastle. That was a debatable one. Newcastle, we had Remy Cabella and Emmanuel Riviere. Don't get your Valencias mixed up, Andy.
No, I'm Ecuadorian. My dad's Ecuadorian, so yes, I know exactly. Yeah. I know exactly who that is. I'm surprised Cuadrado made the list. My mom's Colombian, so that was also like, I guess he did play for Chelsea. I always think of him with Juve, but
there's a couple of Colombians in the mix there as well. Yeah,
Carlos Sanchez.
Yeah, so that's what we're on the list right now. And up next is Brighton with Andy.
Yeah, this that list is starting to take a while. I remember we had like 3 teams. You just read it off. Now the list is turning into an episode in itself.
it's getting there. Nearly there.
Now, Andy, so you made 2 selections for Brighton, and just to give you a little bit of explanation on how everything's going here, our goal is to decide who is the very worst signing in all of the Premier League over the past decade. We're collecting a total of 40 players through these interviews, 2 per team. 32 players will make it into the first round proper. Then we also are going to have a play-in round to basically eliminate 8 of the 40. So what we're having here is that for each team, you get to give us 1 player that goes straight through to the first round proper, and 1 player that will go into the play-in round.
Okay, so that makes it easy.
So let's start with your guy that's straight to the first round proper.
Okay, this one was pretty easy because I also first want to say that I've only been supporting the team since 2018. Also, Brighton have only been in the top flight for 3 seasons. I could use a player that we've signed in the time we've been in the top flight, or I can use a player we signed from 2010 that was in the championship with us. But the first player that I chose was a player we signed when we got promoted to the top flight. And it's a player that almost everyone agrees with me, because I did survey other people. I didn't think it was fair for me to decide who the worst players were when I've only been supporting the team 3 years at the decade. But the one player we all agreed on is a player named Jurgen Locadia.
When I saw this on the list, the first thought I had is, on this show, and as Ross knows from his very first appearance, sometimes we do some things that are a little bit out of the box, and Ross can tell you all about the, the rugby later. And one of these things was that we noticed that there's a lot of folks that are named Callum that are actually professional football players. Like an unusual amount of footballers are named Callum. Ross also noticed that there's an unusually low amount of footballers named Roger. So at one point, Jurgen was actually a name that I thought maybe had a little bit of a Callum quality to it. Yeah, with Jurgen Klopp and Jurgen Klinsmann. And then I found out it's just the same name as George. So,
it is a pretty common name.
But anyway, go back to Jurgen Locadia. Why was he the worst?
So we signed him when we, I believe when we got promoted to the top flight around that time. And when you get promoted, you want a player who's gonna put in work. You know what I mean? They paid about 15 million pounds for him to get him from PSV over to Brighton, and they signed him on a 4.5-year contract. But he's a striker, also plays right wing, and he never really performed to the level that we wanted him to. He did score a couple of goals, like one goal against Arsenal, an equalizer in the FA Cup against Millwall. That was pretty impressive. But this season, he played the first game of the season, and then we loaned him out to Hoffenheim in Germany. And then we got him back beginning of the year just to loan him out to FC Cincinnati for their second season in MLS. So when you look at a player that you paid 15 million to get him on the squad, and he's just getting loaned out, and to get loaned out to Germany is one thing, but now you're getting loaned out to a team that finished last place in the East in MLS. Like, I don't really think that's a good move for him. I think he's going to end up transferring there permanently. And just paying 15 million for a striker just to send him to FC Cincinnati 2 years later, I think it was a big waste of money. And let's see if we do end up recalling him and using him, because we do have him on a 4-year contract. But when you look at how he did with PSV, which was pretty decent, and then how poorly he performed with the Seagulls, he's definitely our worst Premier League signing so far.
Well, I would have 2 quick points before I turn it over to Ross here. The first one will go back to what you were saying about FC Cincinnati. Not only did they finish last year, this is a team that is far and away the worst team in the MLS. They're worse than many second division teams. I think that FC Cincinnati would lose to Phoenix Rising 7 out of 10 games. Ross, I think do you think that Phoenix Rising is better than FC Cincinnati?
Well, it's not a fair question for me, because obviously I have a slight affinity for Phoenix Rising with my wife being from the area. And I'm a little anti-Cincinnati because the current team that I'm the color commentator for, the Greenville Triumph, coached by a certain legend, John Hartz, who began his personal coaching career at FC Cincinnati before not getting along with management. And John Hartz, I've been talking to him on and off for a year now. One of the nicest guys I've ever spoken to in the soccer world, and obviously knows his stuff. Took Greenville to the final. So FC Cincinnati management does not have a good place in my heart.
Interesting.
Ross, this brings me. You actually just gave me an opportunity to mention a random thing that I never thought that I would get a chance to mention on the show. But I found out that there is kind of a random hatred for people in South Carolina, for people in Ohio, and that there's like bumper stickers that say "Go back to Ohio." Can you confirm that this is a thing?
It's probably similar to down here with the snowbird situation. Most of the people down here that live here throughout the year just have a slight distaste for the French Canadians, just because of their cheap ways and just generally coming down here and causing havoc on the roads for 6 months out of the year. So I can understand there's probably there is certain areas that have certain more people from a certain area than others. And then we have a bunch of French Canadians here, obviously a lot of New Yorkers as well, but some of the West Coast, it tends to be more Midwesterners, and yes, up in Florida and the North Florida and the Carolinas as well. So it's not completely strange to me, Phil. But yes, normally the French Canadians that get the wrath of the locals here.
The kind of backstory to that is one time on Twitter, I came across this map, and the map was labeled what state does every other state hate the most? And like, yes, so
I see that this week.
Oh, you saw that? Yeah. So like Arizona was Arizona, where I'm at, is California, which is very obvious. So like Andy, I think that New York and New Jersey, I think they're the ones that hated each other. Like mostly it's like all neighboring states, and then just the one that jumped out at me was that for South Carolina it was like Ohio. I'm like, why does South Carolina hate Ohio? And then I went down the rabbit hole. Apparently at one time there was even a website called gobacktoohio.com.
Interesting. If I remember correctly, Florida hated Floridians. Is that right? I think that's right. We hate our own state.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
right.
Florida hated Florida the most. I forgot about that.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah, go out. I'll post this on Twitter after the episode. People are going to want to see this, and this is certainly going to need some explanation. We have we digressed here?
A little bit, but I can bring us back to Mr. Leclerc.
Ross, bring it back.
I did read it. I always like to find amusing quotes when we have these players to talk about. And somebody mentioned that he was an introverted man disadvantaged at the elite level by a flat-footed gait. That was the quote I read about Jurgen Lecardier. And actually, Potter asked him to come back, I guess, when he came aboard, but he didn't want to come back to Brighton and just sit on the bench. He didn't seem like he got a relatively fair shot there. But obviously, if you have slow feet at the Premier League level, it's not going to end well. And going on loan out to FC Cincinnati, you don't see that very often. Premier League players coming on loan to this side of the pond. Obviously, trying to get something kick-started after their awful start to life in the MLS. But yeah, Mr. Lecardier, definitely a prime candidate for the number one spot for Brighton.
Yeah, he's also got like a music career that he's working on. So maybe that's, keeping him distracted from what he's got to focus on. But yeah, unfortunately,
I smell a collaboration.
Did not work out.
I smell a collaboration.
The only time that's ever worked out was like Bronson Arroyo.
He was pretty good. I forgot about him.
Yeah, for some reason I'm not even going to tell the Bronson Arroyo story. Let's move on. But one other point I did want to make about Jurgen, and this was Ross. This is something that I think you'll have noticed too. This is not the first striker who was successful in the Eredivisie, I think, came over to England and made this list.
Yeah, obviously, when I think of successful strikers coming over from the Eredivisie, you think of Luis Suarez coming from Ajax and simply tearing it up. But he was obviously a special, once in a lifetime player. But yeah, the French and Dutch leagues, people kind of rank them maybe perhaps below the league, the La Liga and Serie A, etc. And these teams try to find these, especially the teams that are outside the Big Six, try to find these bargains coming out of these countries. And sometimes it doesn't work very well, especially on the striker side of things. We obviously have Nathan Ake, who's done well, but we've had some flops as well.
That's very interesting you say that, because the second player that I was originally going to use on the list was a player that came from the Dutch league and got transferred to Brighton. Yeah, I think that he would be a more accurate player to name for the list, as the write-in for the playoff.
The thing that while you guys were talking about that kind of struck me here is that really does make sense if you think about it. Because like when we interview players that play for Accrington Stanley, for instance, and we talked to a guy that maybe came to Accrington in League One this year and played in League Two last year, or maybe even played in the conference last year. And we asked them, what's the biggest difference between League One and League Two, or League One in the conference? And that the answer that we get most often is the quality of the strikers. So it's basically every tier that you move up, the strikers get better. And so I think that maybe what they're kind of getting at is the difference between a League Two defender and a League One defender is a smaller difference than the difference between a League Two striker and a League One striker. So what that tells me is that the Eredivisie I rank as the sixth best league. I would say you have the Premier League, La Liga, Bundesliga, Serie A are the top four. Then you have France, and then I'd put Eredivisie 6. So if you're talking about bringing over a defender or a midfielder from the sixth best league in Europe to what most people say is the best in England, you might be able to get away with that. But because of the difference in strikers between tiers, it's just kind of too many tiers to jump up, unless you do happen to hit that one special guy like a Suarez.
Yeah, you're always going to overpay for strikers anyway. I mean, just on this side of the pond as well, just doing League One, our first season last year, you saw the teams that really struggled to put the ball in the back of the net, just because of that. As you said, Phil, there are quality defenders out there. You've obviously got 4 of those on each team, and meanwhile, some teams only start one striker. So yeah, there's teams that are going to be overspend, and I think that's a lot of these guys on our list of are teams that sort of reached out and tried to pull that guy, that hidden striker gem from Holland or France, and just didn't work out. And this is definitely one of those guys.
It's a matter of quantity, and so there's a large quantity of defenders. There's a large quantity of midfielders, because you're going to need 3 or 4 of each on the pitch, maybe even 5 of each on the pitch at a time. Generally, you're only having 1 or 2 strikers, so it just gets to the point of the elite of the elite. And with strikers, it's sometimes when you think of the most elite strikers, it's hard to even consider how good these guys actually really are. Rick Schantz, the coach of the Phoenix Rising, I was on a conference call with him earlier this week where he was talking to season ticket members, and a question came up about the most impressive player that he ever coached. Of course, having even at 42 years old, having had Didier Drogba, he had to say, well, of course, Didier Drogba. And what he was saying is, and this was the example that he used. He said that in practice, and this is at 42 years old, mind you, Didier Drogba used to, I guess, take another full-sized goal and sit it at the front of the 18-yard box. So you had 2 full-size goals. You had the goal. You had another one that he sat at the front of the 18-yard box. And then there was still a keeper in the goal. He would go out to 50 yards out and hit free kicks that would go over the first goal and then dip in under the second goal and beat the keeper 8 out of 10 times.
Wow.
That was a story that Schantz told. So, I mean, you just think of the level that you have to be at to be a Premier League striker. It's just insane.
Yeah, I mean, Andy can comment on this as well, because I know this guy obviously played for us during our rise to the Premier League, was Glenn Murray. One of those guys you look at him and you don't think, who's this guy? He's got a bit of height on him, but he's older, he's balding, he's slower. But he was a great scorer for us coming up. Some strikers, you can just watch them and they have the knack for being where they want, being where they need to be at the right time and knowing how to finish. It doesn't matter how hard you can shoot or how fast you run. But if you're not in the right spot and you don't know how to finish, then you won't ever be a Premier League striker. And Glenn, part of the thing when we got rid of him was we didn't think he had what it took to be a Premier League striker, and he's proved he can still do it at the level with Brighton.
Yeah, at the age of 37, man, he's killing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's some guys, if you have it, you have that. I mean, Harry Kane is certainly a guy that's in that category, and if you were to look at something like ice hockey and a guy like Wayne Gretzky, I mean, if you look at the physical tools of Wayne Gretzky, he should never even been in the league, but he just had that ability to find the net. Some guys just have that, and I think that the converse of that is no matter how physically gifted you are, if you don't just have that touch or knack for being in the right place, then you're just never going to have it.
Yeah, and there's so many different types of strikers too that you have to really fit into your system. Bournemouth they've never had really a traditional target guy since Steve Fletcher left, and we've had the smaller guys that can run off the ball and like Callum Wilson and finish, from when they're supposed to finish. That's the key thing, isn't it? I know there's a sort of expected goal stat now that I've seen everywhere that really sort of puts the onus on the strikers to finish the chances that they should.
I had both Callum Wilson and Murray on my fantasy team last year, and I really enjoyed that. So.
Smart man,
somebody that didn't know how to score, which I'm trying he's going to get to in a second, is his number 2 pick.
let's go to the number 2 pick, Andy, and this will be your playing round guy. And was this a tough selection to you, or did you kind of have a 1A and a 1B, if you will?
It was tough because, like, as I said, Brighton have only been in the top flight for 3 seasons. And when you look at the players they've signed since 2010, there have been a lot of flops and whatnot. But I think that based on everything we've spoken about today, the second player that I think was our worst signing in the Premier League is a fair choice. It's Ali Reza Jahanbakhsh, also known as the Iranian Lionel Messi.
Yes.
So he many people may not know that they've watched him play before, but he has played at the last World Cup with Iran. Not sure if he played in 2014, but he might have. And funny enough, he was the top scorer in the Dutch league back in 2017, I believe. And we signed him in 2018, and he didn't score any goals in his first season with the club. And everyone was shitting on him completely. You know, they wanted to rip him a new one apart because it was like, dude, we paid $16 million for this guy who hasn't scored any goals. And funny enough, people may not realize that they've also seen him score. He scored on the 1st of January of 2020 against Chelsea. He scored a bicycle kick, and like they were talking about it on a lot of, I'm sure Sports Center was talking about it, that it was like the first day of the year and we might already have the goal of the decade because it was a beautiful bicycle kick against Chelsea. And that was only his second goal for Brighton. And unfortunately, the coronavirus, put a pause to the Premier League. So we didn't get to see what else he had to offer for the team. But Brighton have not won a game all year in 2020. I mean, it's not his fault, but being once the top scorer in the Dutch league, we did expect him to do more last season, and we are expecting him to help us stay up this season. So let's see if he can do it,
Yeah, he was he was one of these Chris Hughton guys. I'll get to Chris Hughton in a second, but I also remember Jahanbakhsh scoring. I remember him getting his first start. I remember looking at the pre-game stuff, and I was like, who is this guy starting for Brighton? Of course, they kept talking about him being his first start. Again, it was against Bournemouth back in late December, and of course, he scored that great goal against us.
Sorry, man.
No, listen, it happens. I know he's one of these guys that he's exciting. He shows flashes of it, but then you get these guys coming over from Asia, haven't had a ton of success, except obviously a certain Mr. Salah for Liverpool. But obviously that Egypt being Africa, but close enough. I mean, we'll talk about as well. I know you mentioned Chris O'Grady's, a guy from before your Premier League career. Talk a little bit about him. I know you're sort of your 1B selection as well.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously had to ask other fans like who they thought were the worst signings, and he was one of the names that came up. We had him for 3 seasons, and in those 3 seasons, he only scored 1 goal in the regular season, and I believe the rest of his goals came in like cup matches. So when you look at a striker that plays for a club for 3 years, he got over 30 appearances, once again in the championship. You expect him to do more in 3 seasons than just score 1 goal. So he was the backup option, if you will, behind Jahanbakhsh.
Yeah, he was a lower league journeyman, Chris Grady. I want to ask you, Andy, obviously Brighton now, you said it's their 3rd season. And Bournemouth have sort of come across this where the first few seasons we were relying on guys that had got us up to the Premier League. Now, the Premier League money is really starting to flow in. We're starting to get a little more comfortable financially, and you wonder about spending the money. How do Brighton fans feel about where's Brighton in that sort of stage of mixing the older guard that have got them up, like the Glenn Murrays, and sort of mixing in with the new money? And obviously, you've had a managerial change as well. I kind of wanted to get your opinion on the Houghton decision as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that. So, like towards the end of last season, it was looking very scary. We were losing every game. It didn't look like we were going to stay up. And like you said, Chris Hughton was using a lot of the same players that had helped us get promoted to the top flight. And I was very and I still am puzzled sometimes when I see Glenn Murray starting, because I'm like, yo, he's 37. And like, if you have young strikers like Connolly and Maupay on the bench, like, shouldn't they be the ones starting and getting the experience? Because years from now, they are the players that are going to stay with the team, or at least we hope they are. So when they let go of Chris Hughton, I know a lot of the fans were heartbroken because this was the guy that like brought the team to the top flight. But I had only been a fan of Hughton in the year 2018 into 19. So I saw a very rough a very rough season. At least the end of it was.
Right.
And under Potter's era, we have had at the beginning we had a lot of success. We beat Arsenal away 2-1, and it was incredible. Like we signed him, we extended his contract to like an extra 3 years. And what I liked about him was that he was not afraid to give the young players a chance. You had players like Steven Alzate, who had been on loan the season before, now starting and playing everywhere on the field, like right back, center mid, goalkeeper, striker. And then Aaron Connolly, also was on loan to Luton Town, and now he's starting games. Scored against the Spurs in his first game that he scored for Brighton. It was against the Spurs. So there was a lot of, you could tell that Potter was more comfortable playing the young kids. But unfortunately, we're back in that stage that we were last year, that it's the second half of the season. It's a new year, and we've kind of gone downhill. And it's even, for right now, it's worse than last year because we still haven't won a game all year, 2020. At least last season, we had won games by this time. But it's looking scary. And I mean, what really can you do other than pray that the team figures it out and turns things around? Yeah, I do like Graham Potter's style of play. I like that he trusts the young kids and he's not afraid to let them get on the field and make mistakes, because they eventually will learn, and it has paid off. But recently, it's just been a roller coaster.
Yeah, it's one of those things that these teams that come up have to kind of deal with. When do you really start transitioning away and giving opportunities to the young players? And hopefully, we get to finish this season. Hopefully, you and Bournemouth and Brighton both get to stay up for another season.
Yeah, man, that's always the main wish. Like, can we stay up?
Yeah, I think that as somebody that supports Accrington Stanley, I definitely understand that feeling, except for it's just stay up in League One and not stay up in the Premier League. Andy, before we finish up here, I was going to ask you, is there anywhere that folks can find you on Twitter or anything like that?
Yeah, Twitter and Instagram. I have the same handle. It's at the neck of Throgs. It's like Throgs Neck, where I live in the Bronx, just, I guess, pronounced the way Yoda would. I'm not even a Star Wars fan, but that's just the first thing that comes to head.
At TheNeckThrogs.
That's right, man.
And I see you like NYFC in the MLS. It looks like.
Yeah, and NYCFC actually.
What did I say?
NYFC.
Oh yeah, and I'm sorry, NYCFC.
And MLS, yeah. I used to
MLS.
Yeah, I used to date a girl who was a Red Bull fan, and then she dumped me, and I was like, all right, I'm going to start supporting NYCFC.
You know what's really funny, and this will be my last digression of the day, I promise. So my buddy Mike Palella that I was telling you about earlier, who's the Brighton fan that I know here in Phoenix, and like I said, I'll have to get you in touch with him. He didn't necessarily start supporting Brighton over a girl, but so here's how I met this guy. Is so when we first started the show, it couldn't have been more than a month or two into the show. So I'm an Arsenal supporter in the Premier League, and Aaron, one of our other co-hosts, is also an Arsenal supporter. So we would post stuff on our page, the score to the Arsenal game. And anytime we would post anything about Arsenal, this guy would make some kind of, like if Arsenal won, it would be an angry face. If, Arsenal lost, it would be a happy face. And so it was just this guy made a comment. And then so I was at the Phoenix Rising game about a month or so later, and this guy comes up and taps me on the shoulder. And he says, "Hey, are you the across the pitch guy?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Hi, I'm Mike. I'm the guy that hates Arsenal." and so anyway, I get to talking to him, and so he's like, "Oh, but the reason that he hated Arsenal is, I guess, his ex-wife was an Arsenal supporter and left him for another Arsenal supporter. So now he hates Arsenal." I said, "Okay, I give you a pass on that one, man." It's always about a girl, isn't it?
Wait, he's a Brighton fan as well?
Yeah, he's a Brighton fan now.
Oh wow, I need to meet this guy. Wow, we're gonna make a movie.
Yeah, I will. I'll get you in touch with Mike. He's a great guy, and he's in the Bandito supporters group with the Phoenix Rising down here, and he's also in the Accrington supporters club with me, but he also supports Brighton in the Premier League.
Yeah, nice, man. I can't wait.
And he's a big traveler. So maybe we can get a Phoenix Rising NYCFC Open Cup game at some point out in the desert there.
Yeah, man, that would be great. Or if you guys, one day pay that $100 million expansion fee, we'll play you guys in MLS.
Yeah, I think it's more of a stadium issue here than anything else. I mean, I don't think it's a matter of not being able to pay the expansion fee because there's some billionaires in our ownership group. It's a matter of working out the stadium just because, obviously, 110-degree game day starts. They're not going to do an MLS team here unless they figure out some kind of cooling system. And they're See, I mean, it's like with American football or even baseball, you just build a dome stadium, but soccer is that one sport where you kind of really like to have the natural grass, and unless you're Jimmy Bell and the Jimmy Bell reference is something from our previous episode. Jimmy Bell is actually he's Accrington's assistant head coach, and he came on the show and spoke to the Gospel of AstroTurf the other day. Catch that one if you have a chance.
Well, if MLS doesn't get started, it doesn't get started anytime soon, Phil. Maybe they can just go to the September through April season. We won't have to worry about the heat in Phoenix. We can just start the season in September.
I think that would work. That would work just fine for Phoenix, but I don't know if they'd ever get a game in Chicago.
No, I hear you.
Good point. Yeah.
Well, Andy, it's been great having you on the show. Did you or Ross? Did you have anything else before we wrap up?
No, I think it's always a pleasure to have Andy on. He's a quality contributor on the social media side of things, especially with the videos, which you all need to go check out. What's your number one video, Andy? What's your number one viewership video?
It's definitely What a Night. Definitely that one.
Definitely check out his videos.
I will make sure I check out those videos. And one more time, you can follow Andy at the Neck of Throgs on Twitter. And I'll make sure that I tag you in the episode when it comes out here. And I apologize for all my digressions. And I'm sure you found more about South Carolina's hatred of Ohio than you ever thought you would today. But thank you
Absolutely.
for
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, guys. I appreciate it a lot.
Cheers, Andy.
Thank you. Cheers. And thanks, Ross. Cheers.
Hey, Phil.
Cheers, guys.